Recording. No, great. All right. Well, welcome everyone to another super special country that we get to talk about today as part of the Global Children's Book Club. This is one of our great friends, Miguel, who's originally from Colombia, who is
Hello.
going to share a little bit more about why there's so much to love about Colombia.
I was born and raised in Bogota, Colombia. I did move to the United States when I was 17, so I didn't really get to have a chance to be an adult there. But I'm definitely very grateful about my upbringing. I'd say there's many things that I miss. Definitely, number one is the people, and the type of feeling that you have when you're around them. Just I think my family is a really great example of who we are. And I have been to a couple countries before, and you can definitely tell how each culture is so different from another. But I want to say from Colombia, I'd say we're pretty happy people overall, and even though we're not as advanced or as um, affluent as other cultures, we are pretty upbeat. We like to laugh. We like to dance. I think one of the funniest things that you'll ever see in Colombia, either you can be on the street or you can be at a gathering anywhere, but just boys and girls just kind of start to dance and like laugh, and you can be anywhere. It doesn't matter. It's there is a sense of sometimes you can call it professionalism in the work environment or in the school, but still that way you're always going to be able to find people who are just laughing or trying to find a good way to pass the time. So that's number one thing that I miss.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. I love the idea of spontaneous dancing. Um,
It's great.
and I see how you brought that with you too. You just keep it with you all the time. Um, I'm curious. I know there are a lot of so Colombia is a mega diverse country with a huge variety of plants and animals. I'm curious for the any favorite foods that you love, specifically Colombian foods that you love, or fruits.
That is actually a really good question. So I don't know if people are gonna hate me from my country when I say this, but I wasn't the greatest fan of my own food. I mean, I definitely always ate what my mom and my family always gave me, but once I moved to the United States, I definitely enjoyed the variety that we have here in the United States. However, I can definitely tell you some about what I grew up with. There's a couple sensational things that uh, I wish I could make myself here. Just we don't really have the same ingredients, but I do have a few things that I miss. For example, one is called an arepa. So, and I don't know if you have something similar in Brazil, but it's kind of a really thick uh, tortilla or a big, very thick panan, and the flour is actually can be pretty sweet. So, and if you stuff it with cheese, our cheese is it's pretty similar to mozzarella cheese. But if you eat that, with this sugary flour that we have, oh my gosh, it's just heaven on earth. It's incredible. A couple other things. There's a really huge soup called ajiaco, and that cannot be made anywhere else. You actually need some leaves called guascas, but you eat that with olives, with capers. Of course, you can throw in some corn on the cob. chicken, of course, and it makes a pretty spectacular soup. And of course, just sour cream can go in there too. So I'd say those are definitely, pretty good exports that we can have, even though I don't know how to bring in the material to make it here.
That's great. I know you are a master of many languages. Are there any specific phrases in Colombia that you think might not exist well anywhere else that kind of typify some of the culture or like slang or anything?
Oof, that's a really good question. I wish you would have asked me before this.
You can think
One
about it.
thing, yeah, one thing is, we'll say que vaina. Um, so, when friends are talking, or when a wife is talking to a husband, or girlfriend to boyfriend, we just say que vaina. It's like, it's just, um, usually the second party just trying to agree with this other person, and we say that all the time, and it's just me saying, oh, I agree, and that's just a terrible thing that's happening, but there's not really a translation to it, and I wish there was one, but you just say que vaina, it just you're just saying, I agree with you, that's just not good. I wish there was something, but not really. So that's uh that's something like that. I don't know if you have something in Portuguese
That's
either.
great. Well, maybe there's something, and it would translate pretty directly. Quando não quer, dois não brigam. When one doesn't, you wouldn't say it in the same context, but it's a way to kind of pacify or find peace. When one person doesn't want to, then two people can't fight. Right? So maybe it's
Oh,
similar anyway to say, okay, I'll be the one who doesn't want to fight, so this doesn't become a fight.
oh, okay,
That's super
gotcha.
interesting. Okay, Vina. Okay, we'll practice that.
Yeah, que
Uh,
vaina. Hmm.
so as I've Colombia is not just diverse from like the food and the geography, but it seems like culturally there are some pretty distinctive regions. I'm curious if you have anything to share about some differences between different parts of Colombia.
Yes, yes, definitely. So the country is, so geographically is the only country in South America that has both coasts with the Pacific and the Atlantic. So the way in which the geography is built is really interesting, because that's actually where the Andes mountains will end. So we have really high mountains where it's pretty cold most of the year, and then we have you know beaches for miles and miles and hundreds of miles. So you add music to it, and it's really interesting. So for example, in up in the mountains where I grew up, where Bogota is, it's a pretty high mountain, so it's compared to Denver and Salt Lake City, as far as how high we are from sea level. And the music that you would find there, that is the music that is composed there, is a little, it's not going to sound as Caribbean, or as you can't dance to it as much as you would with music that you would find in the coasts. So just because we're cold, and because we have jackets on, and it's a little more of a metropolitan type of feel to it, there's a city feel to it, then it feels like the music is a little more towards what British and American music sound like, with the guitars and the bass and the percussion and all this. Whereas once you get down the mountain and closer to the coast, that's where you'll find the salsa, the merengue, and all the music that move you. So that's not to say that we don't find salsa or merengue in Bogota, but it's just we don't really make it there. Like, you really have to go to the place where it happens. Like um, like in the United States, you have to go to Memphis to make country music, or I don't know, something like that. Um, so so yeah, I don't know if that answers the question, but you definitely can see how there are, in the coasts, oh, people in the coast are super loud. They don't, they're just kind of, they're used to not having, I don't know, cell phones and communication. So they yell at each other even if they're across the table, and sometimes you think they're yelling, but or they're having a disagreement, but they're just having fun, and they're just very loud, very very loud. Whereas people from the city and the mountains, we're definitely more kept to ourselves. So yeah, it's interesting how even inside the same country, cultures can be so different.
Yeah. I wonder if there's, I shy away from making the judgment myself, but I wonder if the baseline is different for what it means when you say keeping to yourself, because you also shared that spontaneous dancing, right, in the streets. So,
Yeah, yeah,
uh,
and true. That's
yeah.
true. Um, yeah, absolutely. And sorry, one thing I actually just realized as I've been talking just now is there's a type of not cultural only, but that's just the genealogical makeup of who we are. So the Spanish kind of settled the mount. Well, I mean, they settled everywhere, but um, the more European influence, even American, that was adopted was up in the mountain in the big cities, whereas um, talking 400, 500 years ago, the slaves were brought in from Africa, were brought to the coasts to work the coast. So you're gonna see, and again, this is just me talking about general people. I'm not saying that everybody's this way, but there's definitely a much higher average of people who are darker in the coasts than there are in the big metropolis. So that's something I just thought about. You know.
That's super interesting. Yeah, and good to acknowledge that. Yeah, it's such a cool mix, right? Uh, of natives, of course, and then with, as you mentioned, some enslaved people who came, and then not, the enslavement, of course, was not cool, but the African rhythms,
Hmm.
I think, that are more present in the coast, I think there's a lot of beauty there, and then of course with Spanish influence, it seems just such a diverse country in so many ways. I think we've got a question too.
What kind of sports do you like in Colombia?
Well, there's the number one sport in the world, soccer. It's big everywhere except the United States and Canada, probably. But huge. It is so huge. Every time the national team plays, for a World Cup qualifier, and oh my gosh, even more for a World Cup type of event, the businesses will shut down for 2 hours, and the country just stops breathing, and everybody's in front of the TV watching. Uh, Again, I'm making generalizations again, but I want to say 80 to 90% of the people out there just stop. It doesn't matter what you're doing, you gotta watch it, because this is the biggest party of the year when the national team plays. Now, if we lose, that's going to be pretty sad, but it's a big thing. Another thing that's interesting from our country, actually, Formula One is it's a sport that people watch a lot, and we've had a couple racers that are have been uh, you know predominant in the sport, but they I don't know why. It's just Formula One. It's a thing then.
That's great. Thank you.
Are-
I think we have another one. Yeah.
How big is Colombia? Like, how many people are in it?
Last thing I heard, I think we were at 48 million people. So it's about sixth of the United States. And as far as um, what is that called? Area wise, it's as big as Texas and Colorado put together. So it's definitely very dense. And I'm sorry, I know you said not to compare with the United States, but that's a pretty good example right there.
No, that's a clear example. That's great. Yeah, that's wonderful.
Also, where is Colombia?
So we are the first. If you're coming from the north, we are the very first country you'll find. Into South America once you're coming from Central America. So yeah, so you go down from Mexico, Guatemala, down to Costa Rica, Panama. So you heard of Panama. And Panama actually used to be part of Colombia. This is ancient history, but since the Spanish were kicked out of South America, Colombia was actually one big country that had Peru, Ecuador, Venezuela, and Panama. They were all one big country. I can't remember if Peru was ever officially part of the country. It was called Granada.
Yeah,
Granada, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember if Peru was officially part of it, but I know the others definitely were, and eventually we just kind of split up.
Yeah, and Panama was like 1903 specifically for the canal, I think.
Yes. So that was with the help of the Americans. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it was like a French and American corporation or something.
That's right. Yeah.
Sounds like, yeah.
But I mean, I'm glad that. I mean, at some point, I am glad that it happened because, Colombia had the idea of making the canal for a long time, and they just never got around to it. They just never did it. So, it just had to take an outsider to do it. So. Maybe we wouldn't have it. Maybe we wouldn't have a canal today if that hadn't happened.
Yeah, it's always interesting to imagine. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I'm sure there are certain things. I think that's true for all of our countries. Certainly, sometimes it takes an outsider or outside perspective, at least, to wake us up to some, or to accomplish something or wake us up to something. Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, I just put the baby down.
Well, hello, pretty. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Good to see you.
Good to see you. And thanks for sharing all of this about Colombia. It's been so fun to hear about all that.
Of course. I can't believe you're from Bengaluru. That's so cool.
Thank you.
Oh, I lost you guys.
Sorry, can you hear us?
Oh, here we go. Okay, now I can hear you again.
Perfect. And I do just have one final question, if that's okay.
Of course.
I'd love to hear a little bit about the clothing in Colombia, how it compares to other countries in South America, for instance, the colors, the fabrics that are common, that kind of
thing. I wish you would ask my mom this question. I don't know a whole lot about clothing myself. So as far as the late, I'm a child of the 90s and the 2000s, and because I'm in the city, we dress like Americans, really. I guess we don't really wear basketball shorts as much as Americans do, but everything's just kind of like jeans and a t-shirt or a shirt.
So pretty casual in general.
So yes, but of course, if you're going to work, or if you're going on a date, people do like to dress up though. So when couples go on dates to the movies, or if they go to a restaurant, you will usually see them very well dressed up, like the man would wear a suit. That is actually that is different to what I experienced when I moved to America. So if you're out on the street and walking about, everybody's wearing jeans, but if you're doing something more substantial, then you gotta bust out your suit. And
awesome.
all respectable men have a few suits.
Wow.
Yeah.
I feel like
Yeah, that's a lot.
yeah.
Go ahead.
especially as even just so many newscasters or late night comedy show hosts are just going in their hoodies, and like I feel like culturally, especially during the pandemic, that's probably maybe there's even more disparity than I guess from in
maybe
how
so. Yeah,
casual things have become. Yeah, interesting.
yeah.
There's one
And
hat that I remember seeing. It's sombrero vueltion. I don't know how to say it.
volteado, yeah.
Vueltion.
So yeah, so I mean, again, because you're asking me, a city guy, I give you my own perspective. And one thing that I don't know if it's a thing to bring up in your program, but because of the civil war that we had for 50 years, starting in 1948, the 90s were terrible, the 2000s were terrible, so a ton of the people from the country moved into the city. So maybe a lot of that original and authentic culture that we had was lost, just because uh, people that were outside in the country, they were losing their farms and their lands to the civil war. They would have to move or die. So at the point when I left my city, we had 14 million people, and the area of the city is pretty compact. It's as big as Salt Lake City. I don't really know how to compare that to another place, but it's super dense. We're 14 million people, so we had a lot of high density housing. But maybe going a little bit into what Preeti was asking, maybe 50 years ago, 100 years ago, there were, the people from the country would wear just full white attires to work. I don't know why you would do that, because you would get really dirty, but they do have the big sombreros volteados. I actually don't own any. I was gonna bring one, but my mom told me I don't look good on it, so I don't have one. um, but anyway, so once you do the drafting of this program, just find one on Google, and you'll find one pretty easy. But that is definitely one very authentic thing in Colombia. And whenever you watch World Cup games anywhere in the world, the Colombians are always wearing those, even though when they go back home, they will never, ever, ever wear it unless they're in the country.
I love that they're representing when away from home, though.
Yeah, I think that's how I came to know
Definitely.
it. Yeah, watching World Cup, it seemed like everyone wore it. So that's an interesting insight.
Yeah, you'll never see city people wearing it.
Yeah.
Never. But if I'm gonna travel, to a different country, I'm gonna do that. So, and yeah, my cousins we're all planning to do a World Cup parties and get together here when the World Cup is in the United States in 2026. And I am gonna make sure they'll bring me a sombrero volteado so I can represent.
I love that.
That's great. Yeah, represent.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Well, thank you, Miguel. This has been so wonderful hearing about your amazing country. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah,
well, of course. Thank you.
It's been so fun to chat with you. Thanks again.
Yeah, thank you. It was good to see you guys.
Likewise.